So, Jean-Francois, we're going to pick up where we left off on a rather interesting afternoon note on Monday, talking about the government's tuition fee hikes. I do want to ask you one thing before we get into it. Now, I know that the PQ, because I saw Pascal Beroubet yesterday, likes the idea, but wants to know what the plan is. But then I saw Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois, when asked about this plan, saying, you know what, this is a bad solution for a real problem, the problem being funding for French universities. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I'm not sure what to say. There are two problems. Funding for Francophone universities, you could have said at any point that they're going to increase funding and leave it at that. That would have been a solution. But as we have had a tax cut last year and this year, well, it started last July, and as we're getting into a fiscal crunch, we'll see even in public transit that the Quebec government doesn't have the funds necessary to bail out public transit. So the question here is, the minister says, well, I'm going to get about $100 million from Anglo universities to give to Francophone universities. Part of the scheme was the scheme that existed under Jean Charest, where there was an equalization payment system between Anglos and Francos, because it's so much easier to recruit Anglo international students than Francophone. So this could have been done without that much of a hike in tuition fees, but clearly that's an element. The other element is that they were pretty blunt in saying that we know that in some studies the hike will have an impact on enrollment, and so there's going to be fewer English-speaking students in Montreal, and we're okay with that. So that was one of the ways you could achieve that. Of course, you could have capped in any sort of way. You could have decided that in terms of non-Quebec students, we would have 80% French, 20% Anglos. There were many ways to try and control that, but that's the way they chose. I'm not sure it's the best way, but I'm not as in a catastrophe mode as others.
Okay,
but I mean, let's be clear here. Again, this is really about English and not wanting Anglos to come to the city, because if you
or at least hearing too much English in the city.
And the premier in the same breath practically is saying he can suddenly find hundreds of millions of dollars for a big roof for a roof for the Big O. So money's clearly not really the issue.
Well, you could say that if they want a third link in Quebec City, they can find the money.
Okay.
But the question is, I send you a graph that shows that the proportion of foreign students in Quebec is growing tremendously year after year. I mean, it's been a really big growth in the last 5 years, and the percentage of all of them who know French has decreased. There's only 1 out of 2 foreign students who know French when they get here, and once they get here, another study from StatsCan shows that they don't learn it, most of them. And so at some point you can ask the question, I know it's a taboo question, how many unilingual Anglo students in the center of Montreal is too many? Is there a number at which we would say, well, now it's a problem for the linguistic equilibrium?
Okay, I would point out 2 things. Number one, with issue, we spoke to Jack Jedwab. You had brought up that Canada study that was done back in 2016, and it turns out statistically a lot of these students end up staying here. More than you said it's marginal. It looks like it's about a third, according to that study. But this idea, Jean-Francois, of, too much English, as the Premier said, as Jean-Francois Robert said, and I think you in essence said the same thing the other day when we spoke about English on the street. We asked Tom Mulcair for his comments. I want you to hear what he said.
There is no factual evidence of a causal link between the presence of English-speaking students at those universities and the fate of the French language in Montreal.
Okay, no causal link. Why do you suggest there is?
Well, Tom would say that. Tom would say there's no causal link and there's no study between the fact that it rained all day and now the street is wet. Tom would say that.
Okay, that's
don't
not
think
what
that's
he's
a fair
saying. I think what he's saying is you can anecdotally say that you believe that there's less or too much English being spoken, but causally it doesn't. It's just simply not the case.
Well, listen, in the first 5 years of the CAQ government, given the growth of temporary student and otherwise immigrants, 90,000 people who don't speak French moved into Montreal. 90,000. Now you're telling me there's no causal relation between the help of French and having 90,000 people who don't speak French in a city like Montreal?
Okay, so why did they come here? Did they come here to build a life? Did they come here to work? Did they come to integrate? Maybe they came because they wanted to learn to speak French.
Well, again, the number, I give you the number of 90,000. I mean, the Quebec government is so glad to announce that of all immigrants, old and new, they're up to 30,000 in Francization classes. We have the backlog of hundreds of thousands who don't speak French. The proportion of unilingual English Quebecers grew 20% between the two last censuses. So at some point, you say, well, we're going to have a pénurie, a shortage of French speakers. If you want to have critical mass, at some point there must be a number after which you lose critical mass.
Okay, so so go ahead. I want to go in a different direction in terms of what they bring to Montreal.
Yeah, by the way, with respect to that, you mentioned that figure of $200 million the other day, right? In terms of what it's going to be, in terms of money that is going to be turned over to the French system. There's a story today suggesting that the economic benefit, Jean-François, of those people is over $500 million, and that doesn't include tuition.
I know all these numbers. You can decide to take 1 million Chinese students, bring them to Montreal, and economically, it's going to be a plus. There's no question it's going to be a plus. You won't know where to lodge them. You will break our hospital capacity. You do all that, but
but we don't. But we don't. That's not a good example. We're not bringing a million. But we're not bringing a million people. We're bringing 30,000. So that's not even close.
Well, it's not even close. I'm just telling you the principle is that if you bring people here who have money in their pockets, it's going to be an economic plus. But as we see with immigration, we're bringing into Quebec, as we speak, the equivalent of the city of Sherbrooke every year. Now, clearly, we don't have enough lodging for them, but it's going to be an economic plus in terms of economic circulation of money. So it's the same for foreign students. I mean, a foreign student will spend money here. Now, if you don't care about the strain it puts on language, of course, it's a plus.
Okay, so end of the day, this is what you're saying. It's not about money. That's a smokescreen here. It's strictly about language.
I think it's partly about money. I think that when the calculation is that that it costs, on average, $17,000 per year to form a university student, and we charge them half. It is true that if we charge them half, we are subsidizing English Canadian students who come here and for the most part won't stay here. So it's really true. And if you calculate what the rest of Canada spends on our Francophone students in their universities, you'll get a very paltry sum. So there's no parity.
Yeah, but our students don't want to go to their universities. They want to stay here. Again, not necessarily a fair comparison.
Well, again, there are Francophone students who go to U of T and you go to UBC. These do exist, okay? But they're very paltry numbers compared to English Canadians who come here because it's much cheaper. It is much cheaper. Now, you look at, if you look at how much it costs to go into medical studies at McGill, it's $18,000 a year. In U of T, it's $23,000.
Can we're going to run out of time, and I just want to make sure I ask this today, Jean-François. How do you think this makes us look to the rest of Canada and to the rest of the world, and does that matter?
Well, listen, when the bill on secularism passed, people said that's going to be terrible, for our reputation is wrecked. Now, the year after, the foreign investment grew to a record level and more immigrants came. And then they say, well, Bill 96, I mean, that's it. That's it. No one will want to talk to us anymore. And the year after, immigration grew and foreign investment grew.
Yeah, I'm not sure I heard anyone say that exactly either. Jean-Francois, we are at a time, and I think hopefully by next week we can move on to something else.
I don't know that we will
We've spent enough time talking about this.
I'm going to be off next week,
Okay.
Natasha, but let's see if there's another thing that will be of interest the week after.
Oh, I
Indeed.
think there might be.
Yeah.
Have a good week
Jean-Francois
off.
Lisée, thank you so much.